Right now, as you're listening to this, there's probably someone living inside your head rent-free. You know exactly who I'm talking about. Maybe it's someone you used to love, someone who broke your heart, or someone who hurt you so deeply that even thinking their name makes your chest tighten. You've probably tried everything to get them out of your mind. You've blocked them on social media, thrown away their photos, even moved to a different city. But somehow, they're still there. They show up in your dreams. Their voice echoes in your head when you're trying to fall asleep. You catch yourself wondering what they're doing right now, who they're with, whether they ever think about you too. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Millions of people around the world are dealing with this exact same thing right now. Someone who just won't leave their thoughts, no matter how much time has passed. Here's what most people don't understand. This isn't a weakness. It's not because you're pathetic or can't move on. There's actually a profound spiritual reason why certain people get stuck in our minds like this. And today, I'm going to share with you ancient wisdom from Zen Buddhism that explains exactly why this happens. You see, 2,500 years ago, Buddhist masters discovered something remarkable about the human mind. They realized that when someone occupies our thoughts obsessively, it's never random. These people aren't just memories that won't fade. They're actually spiritual teachers in disguise, sent to help us learn the most important lessons of our lives. I know that might sound hard to believe right now, especially if you're in pain. But by the end of this video, you'll understand not just why this person won't leave your mind, but how their presence there is actually a gift that can set you free. We are going to explore 7 spiritual reasons why someone becomes unforgettable, and I'll give you a complete method to transform this mental prison into a doorway to peace. This isn't about forcing yourself to forget them or pretending you don't care. It's about understanding what your mind is really trying to tell you. The wisdom I'm about to share has helped thousands of people find freedom from obsessive thoughts. People who were stuck for years suddenly discovered that the very person who seemed to be their torment was actually their greatest teacher. So if you're ready to finally understand why this is happening and how to find peace with it, stay with me. Because what I'm about to reveal about the first spiritual reason will probably surprise you. But first, let me tell you about a man who couldn't stop thinking about lotus flowers. Have you ever noticed how sometimes when you say you love someone, it actually makes you feel worse instead of better? Like there's this tight knot in your stomach every time you think about them. Well, there's a reason for that, and it's the first spiritual explanation for why someone won't leave your head. Let me tell you about a man who thought he knew what love was. Every morning at sunrise, this man would walk to a small pond near his village. The water was perfectly still, like a mirror reflecting the sky, and floating on the surface were the most beautiful lotus flowers he had ever seen. Pink petals that seemed to glow in the early light, the sweet fragrance that filled the air around them. He was completely captivated. He would spend hours just sitting there, watching them. When the wind made them dance on the water, his heart danced too. When the sun made their petals shimmer, he felt like he was seeing magic. He told everyone who would listen about these incredible flowers. He dreamed about them at night. He even started cutting his lunch break short just to spend more time at the pond. The man was convinced he was in love, true, pure love for these lotus flowers, but then autumn came. One morning, he arrived at the pond and gasped in horror. The flowers were brown and withered. Some had fallen completely apart, their petals scattered on the water like broken dreams. The sweet smell was gone, replaced by the musty odor of decay. His heart shattered. He stood there staring at the dying flowers, and rage started building in his chest. How could they do this to him? How could they just die like this? He had loved them so much, devoted so much time to them, and this is how they repaid him. He started shouting at the flowers, at the pond, at the sky. "This isn't fair. Come back. You can't leave me like this. I need you." A Zen master happened to be walking by and heard this commotion. The old man approached slowly and watched the grieving man for a moment. Then he asked a simple question that changed everything. "Do you truly love these lotus flowers?" The man spun around, tears in his eyes. "Of course I love them, more than anything in the world." The master nodded thoughtfully. "If you love them so deeply, why are you angry at them for doing what lotus flowers naturally do? What do you mean?" The man demanded. "Lotus flowers bloom in summer and die in autumn. They have done this for millions of years. If you truly loved them, wouldn't you love all of what they are, including their natural cycle of life and death?" "But I don't want them to die. I want them to stay beautiful forever." And there it was. The master smiled gently. "Ah, now I understand. You don't love the lotus flowers. You love the feeling they give you. You love how they make you feel special and happy. What you're experiencing isn't love at all. It's attachment." The man stood there in stunned silence as the truth hit him like a wave. This story perfectly illustrates the first spiritual reason why someone gets stuck in your head. You think it's because you love them so much, but what you're actually experiencing is attachment disguised as love. Here's the difference, and this is crucial to understand. Real love feels like sunshine. It's warm, it's peaceful, and it wants the best for the other person, whether they're with you or not. When you truly love someone, thinking about them brings you joy and gratitude, even if they're not in your life anymore. Attachment feels like fire. It's hot, it's demanding, and it burns you if you don't feed it constantly. When you're attached to someone, thinking about them creates anxiety, jealousy, or that desperate need to know what they're doing right now. Here's how you can tell the difference in your own life. When you think about this person who won't leave your head, what happens in your body? Does your chest feel open and warm, like you're sending them good wishes? Or does it tighten up? Do you feel peaceful, or do you feel that familiar ache of wanting something you can't have? If it's the second one, you're dealing with attachment, not love. Attachment always comes with conditions. I love you if you stay with me. I love you if you love me back. I love you if you make me feel good about myself. But real love has no conditions. It simply wishes for the other person's happiness, period. When you're attached to someone, you've basically handed over the remote control of your emotions to them. Your happiness depends on what they do, how they treat you, whether they text you back. You've made them responsible for your inner peace, and that's an impossible burden for any human being to carry. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of all suffering, and this applies especially to our relationships. When we attach to someone, we turn them from a person into a drug. We need our fix of their attention, their love, their presence. And like any addiction, when we can't get what we need, we suffer. Think about it this way. When you're attached to someone, every interaction becomes about what you can get from them. How do they make you feel? Are they giving you enough attention? Are they meeting your needs? But when you truly love someone, every interaction becomes about what you can give to them. How can you make their day better? How can you support their dreams? How can you love them in a way that helps them become their best self? The person who can't leave your head might be stuck there because you've confused your attachment to them with love. Your mind keeps cycling back to them because it's trying to solve an impossible equation. How can I get them to complete me? How can I make them love me the way I need to be loved? How can I control this situation so I stop feeling this pain? But here's the beautiful truth that Zen Buddhism teaches us. The very fact that you're experiencing this attachment means you have the capacity for great love. The energy is already there. It's just misdirected. So how do you transform attachment into love? First, get honest about what you're really wanting from this person. Are you wanting them to validate your worth? Are you wanting them to take away your loneliness? Are you wanting them to make you feel special or chosen? None of these things are love. They're emotional needs that only you can truly meet for yourself. Second, practice loving them without needing anything back. This might sound impossible right now, but start small. When you think about them, instead of focusing on what you miss or what you want from them, try sending them genuine good wishes. Hope they're healthy. Hope they're finding joy in their life. Hope they're learning and growing. Notice how different this feels in your body compared to the usual cycle of wanting and missing. Third, remember that if someone is meant to be in your life, they will be. And if they're not, then loving them means wanting their happiness even if it's not with you. I know this is hard to hear when you're in pain, but this shift from attachment to love is what will actually set you free, because real love never creates suffering, only attachment does. The person stuck in your head isn't there because you love them too much. They're there because you haven't learned how to love them properly yet. But here's what's really fascinating, and this leads us to our second spiritual reason. Sometimes the person who won't leave your thoughts isn't even really about them at all. Sometimes they're stuck there because of something much deeper, something that most people never discover about themselves. Have you ever noticed how some people just stick in your mind even when they probably shouldn't? Maybe it's someone you barely knew, or someone who was only in your life for a short time, but for some reason you keep thinking about them years later. There's actually a profound spiritual reason for this, and it has to do with something called unfinished karma. But before I explain what that means, let me tell you about Sarah and her boss. Sarah worked at a small marketing company for 3 years. Her boss, Michael, wasn't a bad person, but something about him just got under her skin in a way she couldn't explain. He had this habit of interrupting people in meetings. He would take credit for ideas that weren't entirely his. Nothing terrible, nothing she could really complain to HR about, but it bugged her constantly. Even on weekends, Sarah would find herself thinking about things Michael had said. She'd replay conversations in her head, thinking of better responses she should have given. She'd imagine confronting him about his behavior. She'd practice speeches in the shower about how he made her feel invisible and unheard. What really confused Sarah was that she'd had worse bosses before. Bosses who were actually mean, who yelled at employees, who created genuinely toxic environments. But somehow, she'd been able to forget about those people pretty easily once she left those jobs. But Michael, he lived in her head rent-free for 2 years after she quit that company. Sarah couldn't understand it. Why was this relatively harmless person taking up so much mental real estate? Why couldn't she just let it go and move on? Then one day, Sarah was visiting her mom and telling her about this strange obsession with her old boss. Her mom listened quietly and then said something that stopped Sarah in her tracks. "You know, honey, the way you describe Michael sounds exactly like how you used to complain about your father when you were a teenager." Sarah felt like she'd been hit by lightning. Her dad had always been the type to dominate conversations, to dismiss her opinions, to make her feel like her voice didn't matter. The same feelings of being overlooked and undervalued that she felt with Michael. But here's the thing. Sarah had never actually addressed this pattern with her father. She'd never stood up to him, never told him how his behavior affected her, never learned how to set boundaries with people who made her feel small. When she moved out for college, she just avoided the issue by seeing him less. So when Michael triggered those same feelings, it was like the universe giving her another chance to learn the lesson she'd missed with her dad. How to speak up for herself, how to maintain her dignity in the face of dismissive behavior, how to not take other people's actions personally. But instead of learning the lesson, Sarah just quit her job and ran away again. And that's exactly why Michael wouldn't leave her thoughts. Her mind was holding onto him because there was still unfinished business there. Not with him specifically, but with the pattern he represented. This is what Zen Buddhism calls karma, but not in the way most people think about it. Karma isn't some cosmic system of punishment and reward. It's not about being good or bad and getting what you deserve. Karma is simply the law of cause and effect, but applied to our inner lives. Every situation in our lives, every relationship, every interaction creates a kind of energy. When that energy gets resolved completely, when we learn what we need to learn and heal what we need to heal, it's finished. It dissolves naturally. But when there's something left undone, when there's a lesson we haven't learned or an emotion we haven't processed, that energy stays active. It keeps pulling our attention back to the person or situation until we complete what needs to be completed. Think of it like reading a really good book, but someone rips it out of your hands right at the most exciting part. You're going to keep thinking about that book until you find out how the story ends, right? Your mind won't let it go because it needs completion. The same thing happens with people. When someone represents unfinished emotional business in your life, your mind keeps returning to them until you finish the story. There are usually 5 types of unfinished karma that keep people stuck in our thoughts. First is unexpressed love or gratitude. Maybe there's someone who was kind to you, who helped you through a difficult time, but you never got to properly thank them. Or maybe you loved someone but never told them how much they meant to you. That unexpressed appreciation keeps them alive in your memory. Second is unhealed hurt. Someone wounded you, but you never fully processed the pain or learned what it was trying to teach you. Your mind keeps going back to them because the healing isn't complete yet. Third is unlearned lessons. This is what happened with Sarah and Michael. Sometimes people show up in our lives to teach us something important about ourselves, but we miss the lesson the first time around. So similar people keep appearing until we finally get it. Fourth is unforgiven mistakes. Maybe you hurt someone and never made it right. Or maybe you made a choice you deeply regret and haven't forgiven yourself for it. That unresolved guilt keeps the person connected to your thoughts. Fifth is incomplete closure. Maybe a relationship ended suddenly without any real goodbye. Maybe someone important to you died before you could resolve things between you. That lack of closure creates an open loop in your mind that wants to be closed. The beautiful thing about understanding karma this way is that it puts the power back in your hands. You're not stuck forever thinking about someone. You're just being invited to complete something that got left unfinished. So how do you actually complete karma with someone? First, get really honest about what's actually unfinished. Is there something you need to forgive, either in them or in yourself? Is there something you need to say, even if you can't say it directly to them? Is there a pattern or lesson you need to recognize and integrate? Take Sarah's situation. Once she realized that Michael represented her unfinished business with her father, she could finally address the real issue. She started practicing speaking up for herself in small ways. She learned how to set boundaries without being aggressive. She worked on healing her relationship with her dad. And you know what happened? Michael slowly faded from her thoughts. Not because she forced herself to forget him, but because the energy that was keeping him there got resolved. Sometimes completing karma means having an actual conversation with someone. Sometimes it means writing a letter you'll never send just to get your feelings out. Sometimes it means forgiving someone who will never apologize. Sometimes it means forgiving yourself for mistakes you can't undo. The key is to ask yourself, what is this person's presence in my mind trying to teach me? What part of my own growth or healing are they pointing toward? Because here's what most people don't realize. The person who won't leave your thoughts isn't really the problem. They're just the messenger. They're highlighting something in you that's ready to be healed or integrated or understood more deeply. When you complete that inner work, when you learn the lesson or heal the wound or express what needs to be expressed, something shifts. The obsessive thinking naturally fades because there's no more unfinished business keeping that person energetically connected to you. But sometimes, the reason someone is stuck in your head goes even deeper than unfinished karma. Sometimes they're there because they're showing you something about yourself that you've never been willing to see. What if I told you that the person you can't stop thinking about isn't really about them at all? What if they're stuck in your mind because they're like a magic mirror, showing you parts of yourself that you've never been willing to see? This might sound strange, but there's an ancient Zen teaching that says everything in our experience is actually a reflection of our own consciousness. And the people who trigger us the most, who get under our skin, or who we just can't forget, are often reflecting back the very qualities we've hidden from ourselves. Let me tell you about Emma and her sister Jessica. Emma was the responsible one in the family. She worked hard, saved her money, always did the right thing. She was proud of being reliable, practical, someone people could count on. But she had one problem that was eating her alive. She couldn't stop thinking about her younger sister Jessica. Jessica was everything Emma wasn't. She was spontaneous, carefree, always going on adventures. She'd quit jobs on a whim to travel to foreign countries. She'd fall in love with strangers and move across the country to be with them. She seemed to live life like it was one big playground, and Emma hated her for it. Not hate exactly, but something close to it. Emma would lie awake at night thinking about how irresponsible Jessica was, how selfish, how she never thought about consequences or other people. Emma would scroll through Jessica's social media posts from Bali or Peru or wherever she was this month, feeling this hot mixture of anger and something else she couldn't name. Emma's friends would ask her about Jessica, and she'd launch into these long rants about how someone needed to tell Jessica to grow up, to be more responsible, to stop acting like a teenager. She'd talk about how their parents worried about Jessica, how she was setting a bad example, how someone needed to stage an intervention. But here's the thing. Jessica wasn't really causing any harm. She wasn't hurting anyone. She was just living her life differently than Emma. So why was Emma so obsessed with her sister's choices? One day, Emma was complaining about Jessica to her therapist for probably the 100th time when the therapist asked her a question that stopped her cold. "Emma, what is it about Jessica's life that bothers you so much?" Emma started her usual list. "She's irresponsible, she's selfish, she doesn't think about the future." "No," the therapist interrupted gently. "What is it about her life that bothers you? Not what's wrong with it objectively, but what about it specifically triggers such strong feelings in you?" Emma sat there in silence for a long moment, and then something cracked open inside her chest. I think I'm jealous." The words came out as barely a whisper, like she was confessing to a crime. "I think I want what she has. I want to be able to just go somewhere because it sounds fun. I want to take risks. I want to trust that things will work out, but I'm too scared." Emma started crying then, really crying, as she realized the truth. She wasn't angry at Jessica for being irresponsible. She was angry at Jessica for having the courage to do all the things Emma secretly wanted to do, but was too afraid to try. Jessica wasn't the problem. Jessica was a mirror, reflecting back Emma's own hidden desires for freedom and adventure. This is one of the most profound teachings in Zen Buddhism, and it's based on an ancient understanding of how consciousness works. There's a famous story about two Zen masters who had very different ideas about the nature of mind. The first master, Shengxiu, said that our mind is like a bright mirror that needs to be constantly cleaned to stay pure. But the second master, Huineng, said something much more radical. He said that originally there is no mirror at all. Everything we see is just consciousness reflecting itself. What this means in practical terms is that everyone in your life is essentially a mirror, reflecting back different aspects of your own mind. The people who make you feel peaceful and happy are reflecting your own capacity for peace and happiness. And the people who trigger you, who make you angry or jealous or frustrated, are reflecting parts of yourself that you haven't accepted yet. This is why certain people can push your buttons so easily, while others can do the same exact thing and it doesn't bother you at all. It's not really about what they're doing. It's about what they're showing you about yourself. Think about the person who won't leave your thoughts. What is it about them that creates such a strong reaction in you? Are you attracted to a quality they have that you wish you could develop in yourself? Are you repelled by a behavior they display that you're afraid you might have too? Here's how this mirror effect usually works. If someone's confidence really bothers you, it might be because you're afraid of being seen as arrogant, so you've suppressed your own natural confidence. If someone's emotional openness makes you uncomfortable, it might be because you've learned to hide your own feelings and their authenticity threatens your defenses. On the flip side, if you're obsessed with someone's creativity or intelligence or kindness, it's usually because you have those same qualities but haven't fully claimed them yet. The person stuck in your head is like a walking, talking representation of some part of yourself that's trying to get your attention. But here's where it gets really interesting. Once you start to understand this mirror effect, you can actually use it to grow and heal in ways that seemed impossible before. Take Emma and Jessica. Once Emma realized that her obsession with her sister was really about her own suppressed desire for freedom, she could start making different choices. Instead of spending her energy criticizing Jessica, she could ask herself, how can I bring more adventure into my own life? How can I take risks that feel right for me? Emma started small. She took a pottery class she'd always wanted to try. She planned a weekend trip to a city she'd never visited. She started saying yes to invitations she normally would have declined because they seemed too spontaneous. And you know what happened? The more Emma honored her own need for adventure and freedom, the less Jessica's lifestyle bothered her. In fact, she started to feel grateful to Jessica for showing her what was possible. Emma's obsessive thoughts about her sister faded naturally because Jessica was no longer reflecting back a rejected part of Emma. Instead, Jessica became an inspiration for how Emma could live more fully. This is what reclaiming your projections looks like. Instead of judging or obsessing over what you see in someone else, you ask yourself, how do I have this quality too? What is this person showing me about myself? If you're triggered by someone's selfishness, ask yourself, where in my life do I need to be more protective of my own needs? If you're fascinated by someone's social confidence, ask yourself, how can I express my own personality more authentically? The person who won't leave your thoughts is essentially giving you a roadmap for your own growth. They're showing you either a quality you need to develop or a quality you need to accept that you already have. But here's the beautiful part. Once you start doing this inner work, once you begin integrating these reflected aspects of yourself, something magical happens. That person's power over your thoughts begins to dissolve. Not because you're forcing yourself to forget them, but because they're no longer serving as a mirror for parts of yourself you can't see. When you own your projections, when you reclaim the qualities you've been seeing in them, they naturally fade from your obsessive thoughts because the psychological purpose they were serving is complete. Try this right now. Think about the person who's been living in your head. What quality in them creates the strongest reaction in you? Got it? Now ask yourself, how might I have this same quality, even if I express it differently or have been afraid to show it? You might be surprised by what you discover about yourself. But there's another reason someone might be stuck in your thoughts, and this one involves a trap that almost everyone falls into without even realizing it. Have you ever found yourself replaying the same conversation over and over in your mind? But it's not a conversation that actually happened. It's one you're imagining might happen someday, where the person who hurt you finally apologizes, where they admit they were wrong, where they recognize your worth and beg for your forgiveness. If so, you've fallen into one of the most common traps that keeps people locked in our thoughts. You're not actually thinking about them. You're thinking about a specific outcome you want from them. Let me tell you about David and his best friend Marcus. David and Marcus had been friends since college. They'd been through everything together. Breakups, job losses, family deaths. They were like brothers. So when David decided to start his own business, Marcus was the first person he asked to be his partner. For 2 years, they worked 18-hour days building something from nothing. David poured his life savings into the company. Marcus invested his time and energy. They were going to be successful together, or they were going to fail together. But then something happened that David never saw coming. One morning, David showed up to the office to find Marcus cleaning out his desk. Apparently, Marcus had been secretly interviewing with their biggest competitor. And not only had he gotten a job there, but he'd also given them insider information about David's business strategies. David felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. His best friend, his business partner, the person he trusted more than anyone in the world, had betrayed him in the worst possible way. The business didn't survive. David lost everything. His savings, his dreams, his faith in people. But more than that, he lost his peace of mind. For 3 years after this happened, David couldn't stop thinking about Marcus. But here's the thing. He wasn't really thinking about Marcus the person. He was thinking about a fantasy conversation where Marcus would call him up and say the words David desperately needed to hear. "I'm sorry, David. I was wrong. You were a good friend and a good partner, and I threw it all away for nothing. I've regretted it every single day since. Can you ever forgive me?" David would play this scenario in his mind hundreds of times. Sometimes Marcus would be crying when he apologized. Sometimes David would be gracious and forgiving. Sometimes he'd tell Marcus exactly how much he'd hurt him first. But the real Marcus never called, never texted, never acknowledged what had happened at all. And that's what was driving David crazy. He couldn't move on because he was waiting for something that might never come. He was holding his entire emotional freedom hostage to one specific outcome that was completely out of his control. David's therapist finally helped him see what was really happening. She asked him a question that changed everything. "David, if Marcus never apologizes, if he never admits he was wrong, if he never reaches out to you at all, are you planning to stay stuck in this pain forever?" David sat there for a long time before answering. "I guess I never thought about it that way. But yeah, I think part of me believes I can't really heal until he makes this right." And that's when David realized he'd made Marcus the gatekeeper of his own peace. He decided that his happiness, his ability to trust people again, his whole emotional future depended on Marcus doing something that Marcus might never do. This is what Zen Buddhism calls attachment to outcomes, and it's one of the most subtle but powerful ways that people get stuck in our minds. When we're attached to a specific outcome from someone, we're essentially giving them control over our inner state. We're saying that we can't be okay until they do what we want them to do, say what we want them to say, or become who we want them to become. There's a teaching in Zen called Wu Wei, which means acting without forcing. It's about flowing with life instead of trying to control it. But when we're attached to outcomes, we're doing the opposite. We are trying to force reality to match our expectations. The Diamond Sutra, one of the most important texts in Zen Buddhism, talks about generating a mind that does not abide anywhere. What this means is learning to act with a full heart while not clinging to specific results. Think about it this way. When you plant a seed in the ground, you water it, you give it sunlight, you tend to it with care, but you don't stand there demanding that it grow faster or become a different type of plant. You do your part, and then you let nature take its course. The same principle applies to relationships and situations with other people. You can act with love, you can express yourself honestly, you can set boundaries, you can make amends when needed. But you can't control how other people respond to any of that. Here are the most common outcome attachments that keep people trapped in our thoughts. First is the apology attachment. This is what David was experiencing. You need them to admit they were wrong and say they're sorry before you can feel better. But what if they never do? What if they don't even think they did anything wrong? Are you going to let their unwillingness to apologize determine your emotional freedom for the rest of your life? Second is the reunion attachment. You're convinced that if they just came back, if you could just get another chance, everything would be perfect. But this attachment often prevents you from doing the inner work that would actually make a relationship healthy. Third is the recognition attachment. You need them to see your worth, to understand how much they hurt you, to appreciate what they lost when they lost you. But basing your self-worth on someone else's recognition is like building your house on quicksand. Fourth is the revenge attachment. You want them to suffer the way you suffered. You want them to lose what they took from you, but revenge fantasies keep you energetically connected to people you'd be better off releasing completely. Fifth is the closure attachment. You need them to explain themselves, to give you reasons, to provide some kind of official ending to the story. But real closure comes from within. It's something you give yourself, not something someone else can provide. The beautiful thing about understanding these attachments is that once you recognize them, you can start to let them go. David's breakthrough came when he realized that he could choose to be okay without Marcus ever apologizing. He could honor his own worth without Marcus recognizing it. He could heal from the betrayal without Marcus acknowledging that it happened. This doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent. It means loving yourself enough to not make your well-being dependent on what someone else chooses to do. Here's how you can start releasing outcome attachments in your own life. First, get honest about what specific outcome you're waiting for from the person in your thoughts. Write it down. Be specific. What exactly do you need them to do or say? Second, ask yourself this crucial question: what if that never happens? What if they never apologize, never come back, never recognize your worth, never give you closure? Can you find a way to be okay anyway? Third, start practicing what I call sovereign healing. This means taking back your power to heal and move forward regardless of what anyone else does. You can forgive without them asking for forgiveness. You can find closure without them providing it. You can know your own worth without them validating it. Fourth, redirect that energy you've been spending on imaginary future conversations into taking real action in your present life. Instead of fantasizing about what they might someday say to you, focus on what you can say and do right now to create the life you actually want. Remember, you are not a victim of other people's choices. You are not stuck until someone else sets you free. Your peace, your happiness, your ability to love and trust again are all within your control. The person who's been occupying your thoughts isn't really the problem. Your attachment to controlling their response is the problem. But there's another reason someone might be stuck in your mind that goes even deeper than attachment to outcomes. And it has to do with a fundamental misunderstanding about who you really are. Have you ever noticed how you talk about your thoughts? You probably say things like "I'm thinking about them again," or "I can't stop missing them," or "I'm the type of person who overthinks everything." But what if I told you that every single one of those statements is based on a fundamental misunderstanding about who you really are? What if the reason someone won't leave your mind isn't actually about them at all, but about a case of mistaken identity that's been going on your entire life? Let me tell you about Sarah, a woman who came to me after spending 2 years unable to forget her ex-husband. But her breakthrough didn't come from learning to stop thinking about him. It came from discovering she wasn't who she thought she was. Sarah was a successful architect, the kind of person who had her life perfectly organized. Color-coded calendars, detailed plans, everything in its place. But when her marriage ended, that organized mind became her worst enemy. She would wake up every morning and within minutes, thoughts about her ex-husband would flood in. What he was doing, who he was with, why their marriage failed. She'd spend hours analyzing every conversation they'd ever had, looking for clues about where things went wrong. The worst part wasn't the thoughts themselves. It was how completely she identified with them. She would say things like "I'm someone who can't let go," or "I'm just naturally obsessive," or "this is who I am now, someone broken who can't move on." One day, Sarah was sitting in her car in a parking lot, crying after another sleepless night of thinking about her ex. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't notice the rain starting to fall. But then something strange happened. She became aware that she was watching herself cry, not in a weird, out-of-body way. But she suddenly realized there was a part of her that was observing the crying, observing the thoughts, observing the whole emotional storm that was happening. For just a moment, she stepped back and saw the bigger picture. There was Sarah the architect, who was brilliant and capable. There was Sarah the friend, who was loving and loyal. There was Sarah the daughter, the sister, the woman who loved hiking and made amazing chocolate chip cookies. And there was also this smaller part, the part that was suffering over her ex-husband. But which one was the real Sarah? In that moment of stepping back, she realized something profound. The thoughts about her ex-husband were happening inside her awareness, but they weren't her. They were like clouds passing through the sky of her consciousness. She had been so focused on the clouds that she'd forgotten she was the sky. This is what happened to Sarah, and it's probably what's happening to you too. You've become so identified with your thoughts about this person that you've forgotten who you are underneath all that mental noise. In Zen Buddhism, there's a beautiful teaching about this. The ancient masters talked about your original face, the one you had before your thoughts were born. They were pointing to the awareness that exists before any mental content arises. Think about it this way. Right now, as you're listening to this, you're aware that you're listening. You're aware of sounds, maybe aware of your breathing, aware of thoughts coming and going. But what is that awareness itself? Who or what is doing the being aware? That awareness is who you really are, not the thoughts, not the emotions, not the stories about yourself. You are the space in which all of those things appear and disappear. Master Huang Po, one of the great Zen teachers, put it perfectly when he said, "Your everyday mind, that is the way." He wasn't talking about the mind that thinks and worries and plans. He was pointing to the mind that is aware of all those activities. But here's where most people get confused. They think their thoughts define them. If they think sad thoughts, they believe they are a sad person. If they think obsessive thoughts, they believe they are an obsessive person. If they think about someone constantly, they believe they are someone who can't let go. But that's like saying you are the movie that's playing on your TV screen. You're not the movie, you're the screen on which the movie appears. The movie might be a comedy, a tragedy, a horror film, but the screen remains unchanged no matter what's playing. You are the screen of consciousness. Your thoughts about that person are just one movie that's been playing for a while, but it's not who you are. Let me give you a simple way to understand this. The next time you catch yourself thinking about them, try this. Instead of saying I'm thinking about them again, say there are thoughts about them appearing in my awareness right now. Can you feel the difference? One statement makes you the victim of your thoughts. The other makes you the witness of them. Or instead of saying I miss them so much, try saying there is a feeling of missing arising in my consciousness right now. This isn't just playing with words. This is recognizing the truth of what's actually happening. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the awareness in which thoughts and emotions come and go. Sarah's life changed when she really understood this. She started practicing what Zen masters call witnessing consciousness. Instead of getting lost in thoughts about her ex-husband, she would notice them arising and say to herself, "Oh, there's that story about my marriage again. Interesting." And then she would gently return her attention to the present moment. She stopped saying things like "I can't stop thinking about him," and started saying thoughts about him are visiting my mind today. She stopped identifying herself as someone who couldn't let go and started seeing herself as someone who was learning to observe her mental patterns with compassion. The thoughts didn't disappear overnight, but something more important happened. They lost their power over her. When you stop being your thoughts and start witnessing them instead, they become like birds flying across the sky. You notice them, maybe appreciate their beauty or observe their patterns, but you don't feel the need to capture them or push them away. Here's how you can start practicing this in your own life. First, catch yourself when you use identity language about your thoughts. Notice when you say things like "I am someone who," or "I'm the type of person who," or "this is just how I am." These statements turn temporary mental patterns into permanent identity. Instead, try describing what's happening without making it about who you are. Replace "I can't stop thinking about them" with "thoughts about them are active right now." Replace "I'm obsessed with them" with "there's a lot of mental activity around this person today." Second, practice the witnessing meditation. Set aside just 5 minutes a day to sit quietly and simply observe your thoughts. Don't try to stop them or change them. Just watch them like you're watching clouds drift across the sky. Notice how they come and go on their own. Third, ask yourself this question that Zen masters have been using for over 1,000 years. Who is aware of this thought? When you notice yourself thinking about that person, look for the one who is doing the noticing. You'll discover that there's a part of you that has been peacefully observing all along, completely undisturbed by the drama of thinking. The person who's been stuck in your mind isn't the real problem. The real problem is that you've forgotten who you are. You've confused yourself with the contents of your consciousness instead of recognizing yourself as consciousness itself. When you remember that you are the sky and not the clouds, everything changes. The thoughts about them might still come and go, but they no longer define you. You're free to experience them without being imprisoned by them. But there's one more layer to this that most people never discover, and it has to do with an illusion about time that might be the most powerful trap of all. Most people believe that what they're feeling right now will last forever. And this belief about permanence keeps them stuck in ways that might surprise you. Have you ever been in so much emotional pain that you couldn't imagine it ever ending? Where you thought to yourself, this is it, this is how I'm going to feel for the rest of my life. Or maybe you've been on the other side, where you were so happy that you tried desperately to freeze that moment in time, terrified that the good feelings would slip away. If so, you've fallen into what might be the most universal trap that keeps people stuck thinking about someone they can't forget. It's the illusion that whatever you're feeling right now is permanent. And this false belief about the nature of time and emotion might be what's keeping that person locked in your mind more than anything else. Let me tell you about Maria, a woman whose story will probably sound familiar to many of you. Maria was 34 when her mother died suddenly of a heart attack. They had been incredibly close. Her mother wasn't just her parent, she was her best friend, her advisor, the person Maria called when anything good or bad happened in her life. The funeral was on a rainy Tuesday in October. Maria remembers standing at the graveside, feeling like someone had ripped a hole right through the center of her chest. The physical pain was so intense she could barely breathe. People kept coming up to her, saying things like time heals all wounds and she's in a better place now, but their words felt like they were coming from another planet. That night, alone in her apartment, Maria made a decision that seemed completely logical at the time. She decided that she would never stop grieving her mother, that moving on would be a betrayal of their love, that the pain she was feeling was the price of having loved someone so deeply, and she was willing to pay that price forever. For the next 2 years, Maria lived as if she was frozen in that moment at the graveside. She kept her mother's voicemail greeting on her phone and would call just to hear her voice. She left her mother's bedroom exactly as it was. She turned down invitations to social events because how could she possibly enjoy herself when her mother was gone? Maria had convinced herself that her grief was permanent, that this crushing sadness was now just part of who she was. She would say things like, "I will never get over this," or "I'm not the same person I was before she died," or "this pain is never going away." But something happened in the 3rd year that Maria didn't expect. She was cleaning out her mother's closet, something she'd been avoiding for months, when she found a box of old photos. As she looked through them, she started remembering not just the loss of her mother, but the joy of having had her. She found herself smiling at a picture of them at the beach when Maria was 7, both of them covered in sand and laughing. And in that moment, Maria realized something that shocked her. The grief was still there, but it had changed. It wasn't the sharp, cutting pain that had consumed her for so long. It had become something softer, warmer even, like the difference between a fresh wound and a tender scar. She started crying, but these weren't tears of devastation. They were tears of gratitude. Gratitude for having had such an amazing mother. Gratitude for all the love they'd shared. Gratitude for the ways her mother was still alive in Maria's heart and memory. Maria had discovered one of the most profound truths in all of Buddhism. Nothing stays the same forever. Not pain, not joy, not love, not loss. Everything is constantly changing, constantly flowing, constantly transforming into something new. This principle is called impermanence in Buddhist teaching, and it's considered one of the fundamental characteristics of all existence. The Buddha taught that our suffering comes not from change itself, but from our resistance to change, from our desperate attempt to make permanent what is naturally temporary. There's a famous story from ancient China about a king who was tormented by the ups and downs of life. When things were going well, he lived in constant fear that his good fortune would end. When things were going badly, he despaired that they would never improve. So he called together his wisest advisors and asked them to create something that would bring him peace no matter what was happening in his life. After months of deliberation, they presented him with a simple gold ring. Engraved on the inside were 4 words, "This too shall pass." The king was initially insulted. This too shall pass, that was their great wisdom, but his advisors explained, when you are suffering, remember that this too shall pass, and you will find hope. When you are happy, remember that this too shall pass, and you will find humility. When you remember that nothing lasts forever, you can experience everything more fully because you're not trying to cling to it or push it away. This is exactly what was happening with Maria. She had been trying to make her grief permanent because she thought that was how you honor someone you love. But what she discovered was that allowing her grief to change and transform didn't diminish her love for her mother. It actually allowed her to experience that love in new and deeper ways. The same thing happens when you can't stop thinking about someone. You convince yourself that these feelings will never change, that you'll always miss them this much, that you'll never be able to love anyone else the way you loved them, that this is just who you are now. But here's what most people don't realize. Even as you're telling yourself nothing will ever change, everything is already changing. The you who misses them today is not exactly the same as the you who missed them yesterday. Your understanding is evolving. Your heart is healing in ways you might not even notice. Your capacity for love is expanding, even in the midst of loss. The Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh explains impermanence beautifully. He says that when you look at a flower, you can see that it contains the cloud that rained on it, the earth that nourished it, the sun that helped it grow. And when the flower dies, it doesn't disappear. It transforms into soil that will nourish other flowers. Your feelings about this person you can't forget are like that flower. They contain all the love you shared, all the lessons you learned, all the ways you grew because of knowing them. And even though the relationship might have ended, those feelings are transforming into something that will nourish other relationships, other experiences, other parts of your life. This doesn't mean you should try to force your feelings to change or feel guilty for taking time to heal. It means you can relax into the natural flow of life, knowing that everything moves in cycles. Winter always becomes spring. Night always becomes day. Heartbreak always transforms into wisdom if you let it. Here's how you can start working with impermanence instead of fighting against it. First, when you're feeling overwhelmed by thoughts of this person, remind yourself, what I'm feeling right now is temporary. This specific intensity, this particular flavor of missing them, this exact emotional state will change. It might change slowly, it might change suddenly, but it will change. Second, instead of trying to hold onto good memories or push away painful ones, practice experiencing them fully while remembering their temporary visitors. When a beautiful memory arises, enjoy it completely without trying to make it last forever. When a painful memory comes up, feel it fully without telling yourself it will never end. Third, look for the small changes that are already happening. Maybe you went a whole hour without thinking about them. Maybe when you did think about them, it felt slightly different than it did last week. Maybe you found yourself laughing at something today, even though you thought you'd never laugh again. These small shifts are evidence that everything is always in motion. Fourth, practice what I call future self-meditation. Close your eyes and imagine yourself 1 year from now. What might you understand about this situation that you don't understand today? How might your relationship with these memories have evolved? This isn't about trying to predict the future. It's about opening yourself to the possibility that how you feel now is not how you'll always feel. Remember Maria's story. She thought she would grieve her mother forever in exactly the same way. But what she discovered was that love itself is impermanent in the sense that it's always growing, always deepening, always finding new expressions. Her love for her mother didn't disappear when her grief transformed. It became something richer and more beautiful. The person you can't stop thinking about has served their purpose in your life, even if you can't see what that purpose is yet. And the way you're thinking about them now, the way you're feeling about them now, is also serving a purpose. But that purpose will evolve, and so will you. Nothing in your emotional life is permanent, and that's actually the most hopeful news I can give you. It means that no matter how stuck you feel right now, no matter how convinced you are that you'll never get past this, you're already in the process of healing and growing and becoming someone new. But there's one final reason why someone might be stuck in your mind that goes deeper than everything we've talked about so far. And it might be the most beautiful reason of all. What if that person isn't meant to leave your thoughts? What if they're there for a reason that has nothing to do with the relationship you had with them, and everything to do with the relationship you're meant to have with yourself? What if I told you that the person you can't stop thinking about isn't there to torture you, but to teach you? What if they're not your problem, but your greatest spiritual assignment? What if everything you've been calling suffering is actually the universe's way of helping you grow into who you're meant to become? This might sound impossible right now, especially if this person has caused you pain. But I'm about to share something with you that could completely transform how you see not just this relationship, but every difficult person who has ever entered your life. Let me tell you about James, a man who spent 3 years hating his ex-business partner, only to discover that this person had been his most important teacher all along. James was 29 when he and his college friend Michael decided to start a tech company together. They had big dreams, unlimited energy, and a friendship that went back to their freshman year. James was the creative visionary, Michael was the business strategist, and for the first 2 years, they made an incredible team. Their app started gaining traction. Investors were interested. Everything was going exactly according to plan. James was already imagining the success story they'd tell someday, how 2 best friends had built something amazing together. But then cracks started to show. Michael became secretive about meetings. He started making decisions without consulting James. When James confronted him about it, Michael would get defensive and say he was just trying to protect the business. The end came suddenly. James arrived at the office one morning to find Michael clearing out his desk. Apparently, Michael had been negotiating with a competitor behind James's back. He'd sold their technology and was taking a job as their head of product development. James felt like he'd been hit by a truck. Not only was he losing his business, he was losing his best friend. The betrayal was so complete, so unexpected, that James didn't know how to process it. For the next 3 years, James was consumed with thoughts about Michael. But these weren't just casual thoughts. They were angry, obsessive thoughts that would keep him awake at night. He would replay every conversation, looking for signs he should have seen. He would imagine confronting Michael, telling him exactly what he thought of him. He would fantasize about Michael's business failing, about him realizing what a mistake he'd made. James's friends and family kept telling him to let it go, to move on. But he couldn't understand how someone who had been so important to him could just disappear from his life without any consequences. It felt like the universe was fundamentally unfair. Then something happened that changed everything. James was at a meditation retreat, something he'd started doing to try to find some peace of mind. During one of the sessions, the teacher asked everyone to think of someone who had caused them pain and to consider this question: what if this person came into your life to teach you something essential about yourself? James's first reaction was anger. Michael hadn't taught him anything except that people couldn't be trusted. But the teacher encouraged them to go deeper, to look beyond the obvious pain and see what gifts might be hidden inside the experience. As James sat with this question, something unexpected began to emerge. He realized that before Michael's betrayal, he had been incredibly naive about business. He'd trusted people completely without protecting himself. He'd been so focused on the creative side that he'd ignored the legal and financial details. Michael's betrayal had forced James to develop skills he never would have learned otherwise. He'd become more discerning about who he trusted. He'd learned to read contracts carefully. He developed his own business instincts instead of relying on someone else. But more than that, James realized that Michael had shown him something important about himself. James had always been someone who needed other people's approval. He'd started the business as much to impress his friends and family as to create something meaningful. Michael's departure had forced James to ask himself what he really wanted, independent of what anyone else thought. In the months after Michael left, James had started a new company, this time by himself. It was smaller, more focused, and completely aligned with his values. He was happier running this business than he'd ever been in the partnership, but he never would have found this path if Michael hadn't forced him off the original one. Sitting in that meditation hall, James felt something shift inside his chest. The anger that had been burning there for 3 years didn't disappear, but it transformed into something else. Gratitude. Not gratitude for the pain Michael had caused, but gratitude for the person James had become because of that pain. This is what Zen Buddhism calls recognizing your spiritual teachers. In the Zen tradition, there's an understanding that everyone who comes into your life, especially those who challenge you, are there to help you awaken to your true nature. The Buddha taught that all beings are interconnected, and that what we call obstacles are actually the path itself. The people who push your buttons, who betray you, who leave you, who reject you aren't roadblocks on your spiritual journey. They are the journey. There's a famous Zen saying, "The obstacle is the path." What this means is that the things you think are preventing you from growing are actually the exact experiences you need in order to grow. Think about it this way. If life only gave you easy relationships, pleasant experiences, and unconditional approval, how would you ever develop resilience? How would you learn to trust your own judgment? How would you discover your inner strength? The person you can't stop thinking about has likely pushed you in ways that comfortable relationships never could. They've forced you to examine your patterns, your expectations, your deepest fears and desires. They've shown you parts of yourself you might never have discovered otherwise. In Buddhism, these challenging people are sometimes called wrathful deities. They look terrifying and destructive on the surface, but they're actually protectors in disguise. They destroy what needs to be destroyed in order for something better to emerge. Maybe this person taught you about boundaries by crossing yours. Maybe they taught you about self-worth by showing you what it feels like when someone doesn't value you. Maybe they taught you about authenticity by being false. Maybe they taught you about your own capacity for love by breaking your heart open. The key is to shift your perspective from victim to student. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" start asking, "What is this here to teach me?" This doesn't mean you should be grateful for abuse or stay in harmful situations. It means that once you're safe and have some distance, you can begin to see how even painful experiences have shaped you in valuable ways. Here's how you can start recognizing the teachings hidden in your most difficult relationships. First, ask yourself, how am I different now than I was before I knew this person? What qualities have I developed? What insights have I gained? What patterns have I become aware of? Often, our greatest growth comes through our greatest challenges. Second, consider what this person revealed about your unconscious patterns. Did they show you how you give your power away, how you seek validation from others, how you avoid conflict, how you abandon yourself in relationships? These revelations, while painful, are actually gifts of self-awareness. Third, look at how this experience has prepared you for future relationships. Are you more discerning now, more honest about your needs, better at maintaining your boundaries, more compassionate toward others who are struggling? These are not consolation prizes. These are the real treasures. Fourth, practice what I call teacher gratitude. This doesn't mean you have to thank this person directly or even forgive them completely. It means acknowledging silently that they served a purpose in your growth, even if that wasn't their intention. You might say something like, "Thank you for showing me my own strength. Thank you for teaching me to trust myself. Thank you for helping me discover what I really want in a relationship. Thank you for being part of my journey toward becoming who I'm meant to be." Remember James's story. Michael probably never intended to be a spiritual teacher. He was probably just looking out for his own interests. But the universe used his actions to redirect James toward a path that was more authentic and fulfilling than the original plan. The person you can't forget may have left your life, but they haven't left your consciousness because their teaching isn't complete yet. They're still there in your thoughts because there's still something for you to learn, some way you need to grow, some aspect of yourself you need to integrate. When you start seeing them as a teacher instead of a tormentor, everything changes. The anger transforms into curiosity. The victimhood transforms into empowerment. The obsession transforms into gratitude, and here's the beautiful thing. Once you fully receive the teaching, once you integrate the lesson they came to deliver, they naturally begin to fade from your constant thoughts. Not because you've forced them out, but because their work is done. But knowing all of this intellectually is one thing. Actually transforming your relationship with these thoughts and feelings is another. So let me give you a complete, step-by-step method that combines everything we've learned today into a practical system you can use starting right now. Now that you understand the 7 spiritual reasons why someone won't leave your mind, you're probably wondering, what do I actually do with all this knowledge? How do I take these insights and transform them into real freedom? How do I move from understanding to actually feeling peace when I think about this person? What I'm about to share with you is a complete method that brings together everything we've learned today. It's not just theory. It's a practical, step-by-step system that has helped hundreds of people finally free themselves from obsessive thoughts about someone they couldn't forget. And the beautiful thing is, you can start using it today. Let me tell you about Lisa, because her story shows exactly how this method works in real life. Lisa had been stuck thinking about her ex-husband for almost 4 years after their divorce. Even though she was in a new relationship, even though she was happier than she'd been in years, thoughts about her ex would still hijack her mind at the most unexpected moments. She'd be having dinner with her new partner, and suddenly she'd remember something her ex-husband used to say. She'd be at work, focused on a project, and out of nowhere, she'd start wondering what he was doing. It was driving her crazy because logically, she knew she didn't want him back. She knew the divorce had been the right decision, but emotionally, she felt like she was still carrying him around in her head like unwanted baggage. Lisa came to me feeling frustrated and a little embarrassed. She said, "I don't understand why I can't just move on. I should be over this by now. I'm happy with my life. Why is he still taking up space in my mind?" I taught Lisa the 8-step method I'm about to share with you. Within 6 weeks, she told me something had fundamentally shifted. The thoughts about her ex-husband didn't disappear completely, but they lost their power over her. Instead of derailing her day, they became like background noise that she could acknowledge and then let go. Here's the complete method. I call it the Freedom Formula, and it works because it addresses each of the 7 reasons we've discussed today. Step 1 is called Pause and Acknowledge. The moment you notice thoughts about this person arising, instead of fighting them or judging yourself for having them, simply pause and say, "I notice thoughts about this person are here right now. That's okay. I'm going to give myself permission to feel whatever I'm feeling without making it mean anything about me." This step is crucial because it breaks the cycle of resistance. Remember, what you resist persists. When you stop fighting the thoughts and start acknowledging them with compassion, they immediately lose some of their grip on you. Step 2 is identify the root. Ask yourself, which of the 7 reasons is most active right now? Am I confusing attachment with love? Am I trying to control an outcome? Am I seeing something in them that I need to recognize in myself? Am I identifying with these thoughts instead of witnessing them? Am I believing these feelings will last forever? Am I missing the lesson they're here to teach me? You don't have to figure out the perfect answer. Just get curious about what might be driving the thoughts in this particular moment. Step 3 is called Release the Story. This is where you practice the witnessing consciousness we talked about earlier. Instead of saying, "I miss them," or "I can't stop thinking about them," try saying, "There are thoughts about missing happening right now," or "mental activity around this person is present." This simple shift in language helps you remember that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts come and go. Step 4 is accept the impermanence. Remind yourself that whatever you're feeling right now is temporary. Say something like, "This feeling is here right now and it will change. My thoughts about this person have already changed since yesterday and they will continue to change. I don't have to make these feelings go away. I just have to remember they're not permanent." This step helps you stop trying to force your emotions to be different and instead trust in the natural flow of change. Step 5 is find the teaching. Ask yourself, what is this person here to teach me? How have I grown because of knowing them? What have I learned about myself through this relationship? What strength have I developed? What patterns have I become aware of? Even if the relationship was painful, even if it ended badly, there are always gifts of wisdom and growth hidden inside the experience. When you start looking for the teaching, instead of focusing on the pain, everything shifts. Step 6 is practice energetic release. This is where you consciously send good energy to this person and then call your own energy back to yourself. You might say something like, "I wish you peace and happiness on your journey. I release you to your highest good. I call my energy back to myself and send myself love and compassion." This isn't about them. This is about freeing yourself from any energetic entanglement that's keeping you stuck. Step 7 is redirect your focus. Once you've moved through the first 6 steps, consciously choose to put your attention somewhere else. Feel your feet on the ground, notice your breathing, look around and name 5 things you can see. This isn't about suppressing thoughts. It's about exercising your power to choose where you place your attention. Step 8 is cultivate gratitude. End the practice by finding something to be grateful for. Maybe you're grateful for the lesson this person taught you. Maybe you're grateful for your own courage in facing difficult emotions. Maybe you're grateful for the love you're capable of feeling, even if it's complicated right now. Gratitude is like a reset button for your entire emotional state. It reminds you that even in the midst of challenge, there are always gifts to be found. Lisa used this method every single time thoughts about her ex-husband would arise. At first, it took her 10 or 15 minutes to move through all 8 steps, but after a few weeks, she could do the whole process in just a couple of minutes. And after about 6 weeks, she noticed that she often didn't even need the full method. Just pausing and acknowledging the thoughts was enough to keep them from taking over her day. The key to making this method work is consistency, not perfection. You don't have to do it perfectly every time. You just have to do it. Some days you might only remember steps 1 and 2. Some days you might need to repeat the whole process several times. That's completely normal. What matters is that you're training your mind to respond to these thoughts differently. Instead of being a victim of your thoughts, you're becoming the conscious director of your inner experience. Here's what Lisa told me 6 months after learning this method. I realized that my ex-husband wasn't my problem. My relationship with my own thoughts about him was the problem. Once I learned how to change that relationship, everything else became so much easier. Remember, the goal isn't to never think about this person again. The goal is to think about them from a place of peace instead of a place of pain, to remember them with gratitude instead of resentment, to let them be part of your story without letting them control your story. This method works because it addresses all 7 reasons we've discussed today. It helps you distinguish between love and attachment. It supports you in completing any unfinished emotional business. It allows you to reclaim projections and see yourself more clearly. It frees you from trying to control outcomes. It reminds you that you are not your thoughts. It helps you trust in impermanence. And it transforms your relationship with this person from victim and victimizer to student and teacher. The beautiful thing is that as you practice this method, you're not just healing your relationship with this one person. You're developing skills that will serve you in every relationship for the rest of your life. You're learning to love without attachment, to trust without controlling, to feel deeply without losing yourself. Take a moment right now to think about the person who's been occupying your mind. Can you feel a shift in how you relate to thoughts about them, even after just listening to this? That shift, however small, is the beginning of your freedom. And with practice, that small shift will grow into complete liberation. But there's one more thing I want to share with you before we finish. Because understanding these 7 reasons and having this method is powerful, but there's something even more important that I need you to know about your journey forward. Before you go, I want to share with you the most beautiful truth of all. The person you can't forget isn't really separate from you. They exist in your consciousness as a part of your own spiritual journey. Every thought about them, every emotion they trigger, every lesson they've taught you, it's all happening inside the vast space of your own awareness. You are not broken because you can't forget someone. You're not weak because you still feel something for them. You're not behind in life because this is taking time to heal. You are exactly where you need to be, learning exactly what you need to learn, growing in exactly the way your soul intended. The Buddha taught that we are all interconnected, that separation is an illusion. The love you felt for this person is still real. The lessons they taught you are now part of who you are. The growth you've experienced because of them will serve you for the rest of your life. You came into this world with the capacity to love deeply, to feel fully, to learn from every experience. That capacity is not a weakness, it's your greatest strength. If this conversation has helped you today, please share it with someone who might need to hear these words. And subscribe to Echoes of Dharma, where we explore ancient wisdom for modern hearts. Because your journey toward freedom and peace matters, and you don't have to walk it alone. Remember, you are not the victim of your thoughts. You are the sky in which all thoughts arise and pass away. And in that sky, there is infinite space for healing, for growth, and for the deepest peace you've ever known. The journey continues, and you are ready.